Hi there, and thanks for being here. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and if you choose to subscribe to the channel, that would mean even more. Let's get right into it. My name is Bruno, and one of the hardest truths I've come to accept is this. You can't truly know who someone is until you see how they act when everything is falling apart. For years, I believed I knew my wife, every layer of her. But when my business took a sharp and devastating turn, that belief fell apart, and her real nature surfaced. She looked me in the eye and, with no trace of guilt, said that if I had an issue with her sleeping with my friends, I should pack my things and leave. That was the moment I realized I had been married to a stranger, someone who had simply been waiting for the right moment to show her true face. Victoria and I had spent almost 10 years as husband and wife, 9 years that, on the surface, seemed stable, even fulfilling. That illusion shattered the day my professional life began to fall to pieces, taking our relationship down with it. During those years, I believed we'd built something solid together, a life rooted in mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. I worked independently as a general contractor, juggling residential remodels and commercial builds throughout the metro area. The job was demanding, managing multiple sites, coordinating trades, meeting deadlines, but it was also rewarding. It paid well, and more importantly, it gave me purpose. I took pride in building something tangible. Victoria worked full-time as a receptionist at a medical clinic downtown. Her job offered stability and benefits, giving us a financial cushion between my projects. When business was booming, we saved well and enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. We had a system that worked. She handled most of the budgeting and managed the day-to-day logistics of our home, while I concentrated on expanding the business. She was organized, methodical, and precise, qualities that nicely offset my tendency to think in broader strokes. I admired how smoothly she kept everything running behind the scenes while I dealt with the unpredictability of construction. Our social circle was a blend of friends gathered over the years, through work, shared hobbies, and mutual contacts. Many of them were couples like us, navigating careers and family, trying to create lasting lives. Some of our closest friends were high earners, men in finance, real estate, corporate leadership, whose incomes gave them access to a more luxurious lifestyle. Their wives often stayed home or worked part-time, and their lives were filled with high-end homes, exotic vacations, and all the perks that wealth brings. But I never resented them. I took pride in the life Victoria and I had carved out for ourselves. Sure, some of my friends had fatter paychecks, but I valued the freedom and creativity that came with running my own business. I believed in what I did, and I believed in the life we were building. Every now and then, Victoria would make a comment about someone's new house, a luxury car, or a lavish trip, but I never interpreted them as complaints. They felt more like casual observations than anything serious. That perception changed when everything began to unravel. The collapse started with a major commercial project, converting an old warehouse into office space for a rapidly expanding tech firm. Everything had started smoothly. Permits were secured, blueprints were approved, contracts signed, and payment milestones clearly outlined. But midway through the build, we uncovered major structural problems the previous owners had concealed: damaged foundations, compromised support walls. Addressing the issues required significant redesign and unexpected costs. The client, the tech company, refused to cover the added expense. They claimed I should have caught the problems during the initial inspection and included them in the original bid. What started as a disagreement over extra charges quickly turned into a full-blown conflict. Not only did they refuse to pay for the additional work, they also withheld payments for everything we'd completed up to that point. They accused me of negligence, blamed me for delays, and pointed to budget overruns. Within weeks, I was hit with a lawsuit, alleging breach of contract, negligence, and seeking damages. The claim was several times the value of the original agreement. As word of the lawsuit spread through the local construction community, the damage was immediate. Clients backed out, upcoming projects were shelved, and contracts I'd secured fell apart. The final blow came when my bonding company pulled my coverage. Without a bond, I couldn't bid on new commercial projects. I was even blocked from finishing some residential jobs already underway. The hits just kept coming. Legal troubles, canceled work, revenue losses, and now, no path forward. In just a few months, the business I had poured years into was crumbling. Bankruptcy loomed, debt piled up, and the future was a giant question mark. I had no safety net, no plan B, and no idea how I'd recover. When I finally sat down to tell Victoria everything, I braced for a difficult conversation. I expected fear, maybe frustration, but also understanding. What I got instead left me stunned. Rather than offering comfort or solidarity, she turned cold. Her tone shifted. She became critical, withdrawn, like a mask had come off. It felt like the person I'd known and loved had disappeared, and standing in her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who no longer cared to hide how she really felt. The second our financial stability was threatened, so was whatever loyalty she had left. In the months that followed, our relationship began to fall apart. Arguments flared, almost all of them about money. But they weren't just financial disputes. They were deeply personal attacks on who I was as a man, a partner, and a provider. Victoria started comparing me to other men brutally. She pointed out how other husbands managed to protect their families, how real men kept things together, how our friends' spouses found ways to succeed no matter what. What made it worse was knowing those comparisons weren't fair. None of those men had faced anything close to the legal and financial disaster I was living through. It's easy to stay afloat when you've got a salaried job, benefits, and no personal liability. Running your own business, especially in construction, is a high-stakes game, and when things go wrong, you take the fall. I kept my cool, even when her words cut deep. I understood her fear. We were both scared. But over time, it became clear that her fear wasn't just about losing stability. It was about losing status, losing the lifestyle she had hoped would eventually rise to something more glamorous. And in that truth, the final pieces of the illusion fell away. In the beginning, I convinced myself that Victoria's cutting remarks were more about her unease over our unstable future than any real animosity toward me as her husband. I tried to interpret her irritation as a symptom of our circumstances, rather than a personal grievance. But as time wore on, with our finances in ruins, the lawsuit dragging endlessly, and no prospects on the horizon, her contempt became more deliberate and unfiltered. Gone were the days when she held her criticisms in check. She began to question my choices openly, challenge my competence, and imply that my role as a provider was no longer valid. Her tone became biting, her patience non-existent. According to her, failing to meet our financial needs meant I had forfeited any authority in our home, or say in our relationship. It was a clear shift. She had begun to equate my worth entirely with my income, and once that faltered, so did her respect and allegiance. Everything reached a boiling point one Tuesday night. I came home exhausted after back-to-back meetings with lawyers and creditors, only to find her seated in the living room, speaking on the phone in a voice that was low, guarded, and far too familiar. When she caught sight of me, she ended the call instantly. No pleasantries, no reason offered. Her abruptness was unmistakable, and the secrecy in her tone left little doubt that the conversation was something she didn't want me to know about. I confronted her immediately, asking who she had been talking to and why the sudden end to the call. She deflected with vague claims. It was a private matter, just a conversation with a friend, and none of my business. When I pressed for more clarity, wanting to know which friend, what they were discussing, her demeanor changed. Evasion turned to fury. She lashed out, insisting that her personal life was off limits and I had no right to pry. That in itself was deeply troubling. Her refusal to explain, combined with the secrecy, pointed to something more than a simple phone call. I asked how long these private exchanges had been going on. That's when her words cut through whatever illusion I had left. With a look of cold indifference, she told me she had been confiding in someone about how far I had fallen. She spoke of our financial collapse as though it were a betrayal, not a shared hardship. She admitted she had been seeking emotional comfort, and even guidance, from someone who understood what it meant to be married to a man who couldn't fulfill his obligations. From the language she used, it was clear the person she was talking to wasn't just a casual friend. It was almost certainly a man, and she had been painting me as a failure while casting herself as the long-suffering victim. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a betrayal of trust at the core of our marriage. I told her that while I could tolerate verbal lashings during hard times, I wouldn't accept emotional or worse, physical infidelity. Our problems, I said, should be dealt with between the two of us, not aired to outsiders with unknown agendas. But rather than reflect or acknowledge the line she had crossed, Victoria became more defiant. She looked directly at me and asked why it should matter if she spoke to another man. Then, with calculated cruelty, she asked what I would do if she decided to sleep with one of my friends. I stood there, stunned into silence. She kept going, saying maybe I should leave, because at least my friends were real men, capable of supporting a family. Unlike me, she said, who had allowed a business failure to destroy everything. Every word was meant to land like a blow. She wasn't simply voicing frustration. She was attacking my very identity, stripping me of dignity, and comparing me to others as if I had come up short in every meaningful way. Her suggestion that infidelity was somehow a logical response to financial pressure made it painfully clear. Her loyalty was transactional, dependent solely on my ability to provide. And yet I didn't explode. I didn't beg. I simply looked at her, smiled faintly, and said, "As you wish." That wasn't the reaction she had expected. I imagined she thought I would plead for forgiveness, promise to change, or argue with her accusations. But what she saw instead was a man who had finally come to terms with reality and was prepared to walk away. In the days that followed, the house fell silent. We coexisted like strangers under the same roof, each of us fully aware that the relationship had ended, even if no one had officially said so. Victoria may have been waiting for me to second-guess my decision, but I had already taken the first steps toward ending the marriage. I spoke with a divorce attorney and began laying the groundwork to separate our lives. With so many shared financial burdens, debts, assets, ongoing legal battles, it wouldn't be easy. But I was resolute. I would end things with dignity and fairness, no matter the cost. I refused to remain in something that had become so toxic. Weeks later, when the divorce papers arrived, her reaction was explosive. The same woman who had dared me to leave, who had mocked me with threats of betrayal, now accused me of being heartless. She said I was overreacting to angry words spoken in the heat of the moment, claiming she never meant any of it, that her outbursts were simply a result of extreme stress. She insisted that every couple has rough patches, that people say regrettable things under pressure, and that I should have seen her threats for what they were. Emotional noise, not real intent. But her excuses rang hollow. This hadn't been a single argument or a few misplaced words. She had spoken deliberately and venomously. She hadn't just expressed dissatisfaction. She had fantasized about humiliating me, replacing me, and had portrayed others as superior in ways meant to break me. As the divorce dragged on, things became increasingly bitter. One moment she'd reach out attempting to reconcile. The next, she painted herself as the abandoned spouse, wronged and discarded. Her lawyers claimed her words were born of desperation, that the financial turmoil had clouded her thinking, and I was now using her worst moments as an excuse to leave. But the evidence spoke for itself. Her behavior wasn't an isolated lapse. It had evolved over time, becoming a pattern. The erosion of respect, the emotional boundaries she willingly crossed, and her belief that my ability to earn defined my worth, these were not products of stress alone. They were signs of a deeper fracture in our relationship, one that had been forming long before either of us admitted it. Throughout the unraveling of our marriage, it became unmistakably evident that she had been quietly undermining our relationship for quite some time, nurturing ties with other men she imagined would offer her a more promising future than the one she had with a husband struggling to keep his business afloat. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months, overlapping with a separate legal dispute connected to my contracting company, compounding what was already a period of intense personal and professional upheaval. Managing the dual burden of divorce and a business-related lawsuit left me emotionally drained, financially depleted, and chronically short on time, resources that were already stretched thin in the wake of our financial instability. That period stands out as the most grueling phase of my adult life, marked by relentless legal battles and a daily fight to maintain some semblance of mental clarity and emotional control. The simultaneous collapse of my career, the erosion of my finances, and the dissolution of my marriage created a perfect storm, one that tested the limits of my endurance on every front. Yet, about 5 months after the divorce was finalized, the lawsuit came to a close through a negotiated settlement that, while far from ideal, saved me from the brink of bankruptcy and signaled the start of a slow professional rebound. Although the terms of the agreement were disappointing, I walked away with significantly less than I believed I was owed and had to agree to restrictions that limited future business opportunities. It gave me the closure I desperately needed. More importantly, it removed the constant fear of escalating legal fees and financial ruin, allowing me to finally take a breath and begin to move forward. The settlement didn't restore my income overnight, nor did it erase the debts that had piled up, but it gave me a baseline of stability, a critical foundation upon which I could begin rebuilding. I cautiously returned to smaller construction jobs, focusing my energy on regaining the trust of clients and repairing the reputation that had been tarnished during the legal chaos. Recovery, of course, was a slow climb. Reconstructing a business in the wake of such devastation demands more than competence. It requires consistency, patience, and a willingness to start from the ground up. I took on modest projects with minimal profit, determined to show that I could still deliver on time and within budget, no matter the turmoil I'd been through. What kept me going was the unwavering belief that I could rebuild not just what was lost, but something stronger and more honest. The experience of losing everything came with harsh but invaluable lessons about perseverance, integrity, and the stark difference between a superficial bond and a true partnership. As devastating as my separation from Victoria was, it ultimately liberated me from a relationship anchored in conditional allegiance, where love and support were tied to income and status, not shared sacrifice or mutual respect. Her tendency to hold me up against other men and to suggest betrayal whenever hardship struck pointed to deeper flaws that, in retrospect, would likely have doomed our marriage no matter how successful I became. The version of Victoria I encountered during our financial collapse wasn't a new development. It was a revelation of the person she had always been beneath the surface. The woman who once appeared loyal and loving during comfortable times revealed herself to be someone whose devotion was entirely dependent on material security. When she said my friends were real men who know how to care for their families, she made it painfully clear that, to her, a man's worth was defined solely by financial output, not by character, effort, or emotional presence. The divorce itself was relatively simple to finalize, largely because neither of us had substantial assets, only debts we both carried. Still, it allowed for a clean and necessary break. With time, I came to appreciate that Victoria had revealed her true self when she did. Before I wasted more years in a relationship built on illusion rather than authentic connection, her biting comments and final ultimatum forced me to confront the reality of our situation. There was no real partnership to salvage. When she told me that if I couldn't accept her being intimate with my friends, I should simply leave, she didn't just end the marriage, she made the choice unmistakably clear. Sometimes, the harshest truths about those we love are also the most liberating. They allow us to shed the false narratives we've been clinging to and see things as they truly are. When Victoria praised my friends as real men, she inadvertently exposed her narrow understanding of strength and virtue. True strength isn't abandoning your loved ones when things fall apart, and real loyalty doesn't vanish when the comforts of life are threatened. A genuine partner stands beside you when the path gets hard, and offers compassion rather than judgment. The pain that followed our separation was intense, but it also forged the most transformative chapter of my life. I unearthed a resilience I hadn't known existed and began rebuilding. This time, not just my business, but the very foundation of how I lived and who I chose to be. Rebuilding, I came to learn, wasn't just about restoring a paycheck or securing new contracts. It was about constructing a life rooted in truth, integrity, and emotional honesty. It meant leaving behind the hollow compromises that had defined my marriage and committing to something real. Though Victoria's betrayal left scars, it also marked the start of a better journey, one shaped by self-respect and a deeper clarity of purpose. And that ultimately is where our story ends.